11 minutes before Hal Finney posted running Bitcoin on Twitter, he posted this. Imagine that Bitcoin is successful. Then the total value of the currency should be worth the total value of all wealth in the world, which gives each coin a value of about 10 million. 16 years ago to this day, he predicted $10 million Bitcoin when the price of it was zero. With Bitcoin falling to 91K yesterday, people on Twitter were already throwing in the towel, saying that Bitcoin reached maximum adoption. Hal Finney understood the same thing that Michael Saylor does, that Bitcoin is more than peer-to-peer currency. It's an asset that's going to absorb all of the world's wealth.
This is the big idea. Satoshi discovered a method to store value without a trusted intermediary, channeling energy through time and space. When I transfer $1 billion from here to Tokyo, I move the money through space. When I store the $1 billion for 1,000 years, that's revolutionary. Nobody in the history of the world ever figured out how to store capital for 100 years or 10 years or 1,000 years.
In the words of Charlie Munger, the first 100K is the hardest, and after that, everything gets much easier. But how high can Bitcoin go? What's the total addressable market for wealth in the world? Today, we look at why Hal Finney's $10 million prediction isn't as crazy as what it sounded like in 2009. Will the fiat world collapsing bring Bitcoin down with it? Let's find out. This is Dante Cook with Bitcoin Simply. Let's go.
You think about it, you realize that the implication of not needing a trusted intermediary to transfer value is I don't need a trusted intermediary to store the value. Now, I found something completely new. I found an asset without the financial risk of a currency, a stock, or a bond, or the physical risk of real estate or property.
Michael Saylor pointed out that currency as we know it today has financial risk. And that's why global wealth is $900 trillion today. The currency itself is not storing our economic energy properly. The dollar has been in the process of collapse long before Bitcoin arrived in 2009. And the process of collapse isn't just in the dollar. It's also in the euro and it's also in the yen. This is probably my favorite slide and segment from Parker Lewis's famous presentation, Bitcoin is not a hedge.
How many of you guys are familiar with Sesame Street? They have the Sesame Street segment called One of These Things is Not Like the Others. And what I'm demonstrating here is the percentage rate of increase in the supply of Bitcoin, it both being predictable and going down each year. That's the left side. And then I show you the rate of change of the base money of the reserve currencies of the world, the dollars, euros, yen. So, and this is from 2011 to 2022. So the percentage increase in the supply of currency. So what you can see, those big spikes, the last 3 years, that was 2020. That represents that the Fed created 80% more money of base money in a single year. The euro was slightly better at increasing 50%. The yen was over 20%. But this is ultimately what Bitcoin is competing against. And that each year, as Bitcoin becomes more scarce, it becomes more obvious to more people.
Here's an interesting stat. Sean Payton from the Broncos has a winning record of 30-12 against bald-headed coaches. Are the Bills in trouble? Can the Broncos pull off the upset? Another interesting stat that's not an upset. Bitcoin has a 100% record against dollar bills. And that's because they're being printed to infinity. And that's why it's going up forever, Laura. People are working hard with their time, their talent, and their energy to save money. But central banks who have unlimited power can devalue that time, talent, and energy with just a click of a button.
Simply flooded the system with money.
Yes, we did. That's another way to think about it. We did.
Where does it come from? Do you just print it?
We print it digitally. So we as a central bank, we have the ability to create money digitally. And we do that by buying treasury bills or bonds or other government guaranteed securities. And that actually increases the money supply.
This is creating massive inflation and unaffordability for people globally. But Janet Yellen recently started her comedy career, and she said that printing money during COVID only had a little bit to do with inflation.
And I think the spending was necessary.
Did it spark the inflation?
It may have contributed a little bit to the inflation.
And Janet Yellen genuinely hopes that the next administration takes the federal deficits seriously. But who is she kidding? The last administration to have a federal surplus was Bill Clinton. We've seen $15.2 trillion in debt added with you as the federal vice chair and the Treasury Secretary. And let's not forget, back in 1996, you created the environment which allowed inflation to be okay in the first place. Listen to this clip from Judy Schell, which talks about this famous FOMC meeting in July of 1996, where they actually discuss how they came up with the 2% mandate in the first place.
When the Fed decided to have a target rate of 2%, it's a very interesting transcript to read of July 1996. Greenspan was the chair. Janet Yellen was a member of the Board of Governors. Jerry Jordan was the head of the Cleveland Federal Reserve District Bank. And they were all on the Monetary Policy Committee, the Federal Open Market Committee. And they were asking themselves, how do we define this mandate of promoting stable prices? Because what does that mean? And Greenspan said, I think it means no inflation, stable prices. And in fact, in the legislation, they asked the Fed within, I think it was 3 years, to hit 0%. But Janet Yellen made an argument, very Keynesian, saying, and her husband is an economist, very accomplished. His theory was that in downtimes, people would be so upset to have a cut in their salary that it's better to delude people, it's called money illusion, into thinking that they got a 1% raise, give them a nominal 1% raise, but if inflation is 2%, then you really did cut them 1%. You really cut their wages, but they won't notice. As proof of this theory, and I find this kind of reprehensible, but Yellen actually said, you'll all be happy to know they gave this same survey to a set of economists, and none of them would be happy. And it shows in the transcript, parenthetically, there was laughter around the table. And I guess the joke is that, well, economists are smarter than average people. Well, I think we've seen from union bargaining that people are very aware when their purchasing power is diminished by inflation.
The people have been lied to and their purchasing power has been diminished through inflation or theft. And this game of theft only continues because people are willing to buy U.S. treasuries to fund these continual deficits. But there's cracks showing in the market, and the market seems to be experiencing some distress right now. Rising treasury yields and a strong dollar are putting pressure on the entire system. But before we go any further, I want to take a moment to recognize our two sponsors. Since 2018, Ledden has been the global leader when it comes to unlocking liquidity of your Bitcoin in dollars or your local currency without selling your Bitcoin. They've processed $6.5 billion worth of loans to tens of thousands of clients. And I've gone through the process myself. It takes about 2 minutes to fill out the loan application, and your account is funded in your local currency in less than 24 hours. You can get a benefit from your Bitcoin stack without selling your Bitcoin stack. Head to ledden.io/borrowing to borrow against your Bitcoin today with confidence and peace of mind. That's ledden.io/borrowing. And when it comes to securing your Bitcoin the right way and taking self-custody, well, you need a coach. And you can find one of those coaches at thebitcoinway.com. Members of their team will walk you through proper 100% self-custody step by step so you can remove all counterparty risk, stop sharing your keys with third parties, and ensure you protect your generational wealth the right way. Head to thebitcoinway.com and schedule a free 30-minute consultation with their team. Central bankers don't even care about the impact that their decisions have on people like you and me. What's the difference between 2% inflation and 3% inflation anyway?
There's a lot of people that are nodding with you because we can deflate our way out of some of the step, but the difference between 2% and 3% compounded for the dollar is devastating. And I don't know, for you to just blow it off is a little weird. I mean, there's a reason they want 2%. Anyone can move goalposts. I mean, if you compound 3%, that's 50% higher than 2%.
Do you know where 2% comes from?
I'm not.
No, but 2%
3% it would be. Would make all of us feel awful in 10 years.
2% comes from the Bank of New Zealand in the early 90s.
It seems like a good number to me.
But it's an arbitrary number. What you've got to take into...
Well, 5 is an arbitrary number. If you want to deflate 36 trillion, let's go to 10 then.
I don't want to pull the rug from under U.S. economic exceptionalism. I think we are outpacing the rest of the world.
We're starting to at 3%.
I think we are investing in the economies of tomorrow, in the growth drivers of tomorrow. If we not
government?
No, the private sector, everything else. If you push this economy into recession...
The private sector is not what causes the inflation.
Joe, if you push this economy into recession, you will not just lose current standard of living, you will lose future standard of living. We are in a very good position.
3% loses the future standard of living. That's the problem.
2.5 to 3 is what I said. You went immediately to 3.
Well, if you say 3 at the high end,
and as long as inflation,
okay with it.
As long as inflation expectations are stable, you can navigate.
You better buy some Bitcoin, Mohammed.
And this is exactly why the bond market has been in a 53-month bear market. With inflation, you're losing more and more of your purchasing power. People need to earn extremely high rates of return just to not be devalued, just to keep their head above water. Which is why stocks as a percentage of portfolios has hit 36%, which is higher than the percentage it was during the Great Financial Crisis or in the 2000 dot-com bubble. And for most people, they're not investing in the S&P 500 like they think. They're investing into the S&P 10 because the top 10 stocks account for 40% of the returns in the S&P 500. More and more people are turning to Bitcoin for this reason, because it's not only a faster horse, but it accomplishes the same thing in a better and more secure way. $5.8 trillion asset manager Fidelity says that Bitcoin is an insurance policy against unknown consequences of money printing. And here's Senator Cynthia Lummis' recommendation.
I encourage people to buy and hold. I encourage them to say Bitcoin for their retirement, for their future. And that's because as the Congress spends trillions and trillions of dollars and is flooding our economy and the world economy with U.S. dollars, there's no way that we cannot debase the value of the U.S. dollars.
So going back to the earliest Bitcoin price prediction ever by Hal Finney on January 10th of 2009, what will take us from $95K to $10 million a coin? Well, once it becomes apparent that Bitcoin is a better digital commodity or digital capital versus analog stores of value, it'll be too late for most people. The price is going to respond accordingly.
Today, there's 19.7 million Bitcoin. In 2034, there'll be 20.8 million Bitcoin. You've got 10 years. That's the gold rush. We're headed toward a point when 99% of all the Bitcoin is mined. That's the point of absolute scarcity. The last 200,000 Bitcoin come out over 106 years. What does that mean? There's going to be reflexive price shock at 0.99. At 0.99, and you've only got 3,759 days, that's all you have. There's only 1,145,000 Bitcoin for sale. At today's price, it's $74 billion. MicroStrategy will buy $5 billion of Bitcoin in 1 year. This is not a lot. This is a trivial amount. The price cannot stay at this level. That's $20 million a day. We announced a $2 billion equity offering. We raised $2.4 billion in the first 6 months of this year. Look at those numbers. It's not that much. This is a phenomenon. After 0.99, Bitcoin creation is offset by lost Bitcoin. The supply is effectively fixed. It's the inflection point where Bitcoin becomes the world's first deflationary asset. There's never been anything like it, right? It's more scarce than land in Manhattan. It's more scarce than anything you can name, anything you've ever invented. The fact is, no one's ever seen this before. Therefore, you can't compare it to anything. It becomes the world's first perfect money.
What happens in a world where the amount of things that people need to invest in shrinks from thousands to just a few asset classes, with Bitcoin being one of them? And people are simply able to store their wealth in currencies or use their currencies in the way that they were designed to without being devalued every single year as more currency gets printed into the system. What happens when the world isn't addicted to online gambling, where the low-income earners in our country don't need to gamble just in order to make ends meet, where people could fly on a plane without the need to gamble in order to keep up with the debasement of the currency? That world is coming, and it only exists in a Bitcoin future, because Bitcoin is the only asset that's outside of this existing game that we've been playing in for far too long. Bitcoin will continue to absorb all of the world's wealth. A $10 million price prediction may just be too low. If you believe in that future, join me and Bitcoiners from all across the world who will be coming to Dallas, Texas from April 3rd through April 6th to the BitBlockBoom conference. Get off the fence. Buy your ticket today so that you can hear from some of the greatest minds and speakers in Bitcoin, like Parker Lewis, Guy Swan, Marty Bent, Bob Burnett, and me. You'll get access to learn in exclusive workshops and connect with some of your favorite Bitcoiners in real life at our Saturday casino night and other exclusive events. You can get all of this value with a single ticket. Get $100 off your all-inclusive ticket at bitblockboom.com by entering the promo code BBB25. That's promo code BBB25. And if you believe in a Bitcoin future, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share it with friends who need to understand what's happening in the world around them. This is Dante Cook with Bitcoin Simply. Happy stacking.